Hey folks, in this episode of the podcast, I sit down with Greg McMillan. He's an iPhone photographer, and we're going to talk about, is the iPhone ready for pro work? This is TWiP. Hey, welcome back to This Week in Photo. I am your host, Frederick Van Johnson. Today, it's all about iPhone photography. Most of us, a lot of us, not all of us, but most of us have an iPhone or have used one in the past. And I'll tell you, from the days of the Palm Treo, remember those? The Palm Treo and all these phones that kind of could take photos, but they were really not photos. From those days till now has been a quantum leap in the quality that these devices can put out. A lot of folks, however, still think we're back in the Palm Treo and Razor days with those substandard cameras. I wanted to have this conversation with Greg because he is, obviously being an iPhone photographer, a proponent of using this device to do all kinds of work. In fact, he's even writing a book about this kind of photography. So I wanted to have the discussion. I wanted to have a discussion with someone who knows more about that form, the art form of shooting with mobile devices than I do, kind of get to the bottom of, is it ready for professional work? So Greg McMillan, welcome to the podcast. How's it going?
It's going very well. Hello, Frederick. It's absolutely an honor to talk to you. I've been a big fan for years.
Oh, really? Thank you. Thank you. That means a lot. Thank you. And thank you for coming on, because I think this is an important topic. The topic that's been sucking all the oxygen out of the photography genre room has been artificial intelligence and all that stuff, right? And if you want to get down to, the DNA of it, this kind of is that, because there's some machine learning built into iPhones that allows it to do some of the things it does. But this isn't about AI. This is about using the iPhone for pro work, and, from someone who understands the deep level of how it can or cannot be used for that. This is that discussion. So let's start with introduction. So Greg McMillan, give us your elevator pitch of who you are when you're stuck in an elevator with some billionaire CEO and they're like, so what do you do? Like, what do you say to them?
Yeah, well, okay, I guess it depends on how many floors we're going here, but so I have been interested in photography since a very young age. My very first camera was like one of those Kodak 110 film things, and that goes way back. And then years later, I got into the SLR with the film, and then obviously the move to digital. So I used to have a lot of Canon gear, and once I started, I was a BlackBerry fanatic, even when the iPhone first came out, and when I saw an image that a friend of mine took with an iPhone 4, I mean, that's the iPhone that really broke it for photography. It really broke through. And when I saw an image he took, I thought, well, what am I doing with these Blackberries? The cameras in these things are, 3 megapixels or whatever they were. So I started paying a little more attention to the Apple stuff and what they were doing. And the 4S was my first iPhone, and I had a lot of fun with it. I did in 2012 of all years, a leap year, I did a 366 project, I guess you could say, where I took a photo, edited it, and put it on Instagram in the same day. And that really got me going with the different apps and all that stuff. So, that kind of sparked my interest in it. And then I really started through Instagram, I really started to see how popular this was getting to be. And it wasn't really just, popular. It was a movement, right? Mobile photography had become a movement. And over the years now, since then, I started using my Canon stuff less and using my iPhone more. I went from the 4S to the 5S to the 6. I was on the S cycle for a few years. And when I had my 6S, my Canon stuff sat in the closet for far too long, and I thought, okay, maybe I need to make a decision. And I decided to sell all my Canon stuff, and it was basically July of 2016. and I've been using an iPhone ever since. And
Wow.
I don't regret it at all. It's, I could lug 20 pounds of gear in my back, or I can put a phone in my pocket and away I go. And I know I did this knowing full well that there will be limitations, and that's a challenge that I accepted. And that's the thing that kind of beat me up for a few years, or not a few years, a few months, I guess, when I started thinking about making the jump. And I thought, okay, I'm gonna go with it. I'm gonna jump in with both feet and deal with the limitations as they come. And it's just been fun. It's been a fun ride, and I can't see myself getting another traditional camera. I just can't see it.
And I think, that's, and I'm somewhere in between, right? Because on one side, I'm a Nikon shooter, all right? So I got a Nikon bag with the holy trinity of lenses in it, and I love it, over there. But and what I'm on right now is a Lumix. This is a Lumix. What is this camera? S5 II that I'm on. So mirrorless camera. So I'm using mirrorless for this. I don't have to. I could plug this phone in and use it as my webcam if I want, and I could grab my phone and take it out and do photography. But myself, like many people, are in that. Is it ready yet? Can I? Should I just leave the bag at home and just take my phone? On this trip that I'm going on, or am I going to miss it? That resistance that your brain builds, and you're like, oh no, phone's not ready yet. I got to bring my proper kit, or else I'm not a real photographer, right?
Yeah.
So how did you make that leap? How did you make the leap from okay, I can leave the Canon stuff at home, and it's okay to just bring the phone as my primary image capture device? How'd you get there?
I think what really the biggest catalyst was the fact that there were so many people, and it still happens today, but there were so many people who could not accept the fact that this is a camera. And I was a real, I really fought for the cause for the iPhone photography community. Yes, it is a camera. It has a sensor. It has a shutter and all that stuff. It's a camera. And so I guess part of it was trying to prove that to the world in a way. Now, I don't take photos as a professional. I don't get paid to do it. So I guess that made it a little easier. It's a hobby for me. And, it just, it became so much fun that I just, and
that's the word, right? Fun. That's the thing. That is totally the word, because it's not that shooting with a traditional camera, state of the art mirrorless Nikon Z6 over there, right? Is not like that is not fun, because it's a different kind of fun. I think what I think of fun shooting with my phone, notwithstanding the endless number of apps that you can install to do an endless number of things with the images you capture, but just the lightness and the portability, and you're out and about, and it's not a commitment. Like, maybe that's the word. It's more fun because it's not a commitment to the backpack, and going out, and you're a photographer, and everyone knows you're a photographer because you got the big lens and the camera and all that. With the phone, you're just like everybody else, but you happen to, know a little bit more about lighting and composition,
and with street photography, I mean, using a phone, and this is weird to me, but using a phone is so much more accepted by people on the street than if you pulled out your Nikon, with a 200 millimeter lens on it or whatever. And those are the cameras that people don't want pointed at them. Whereas you point an iPhone at them, they don't stop and think that, okay, you could take a picture on the street, which is legal. It's open public domain.
It's public,
but you can have that. You can have that on the internet, whether it's Flickr or Instagram or wherever, in seconds. And what are they going to do? But more and more professionals are starting to play around with these things, and I can't remember if you had him on your show or not, Rick Salmon. I interviewed him on the podcast a while ago. He went to Morocco, and then when he got back, he came on my podcast and we talked about his trip. and he said he took just his iPhone on that trip.
Wow.
He left all the other stuff at home.
Yeah.
And he had a blast. And the
Yeah.
pictures he came up with were great.
It's a quality of life thing, isn't it, Greg? Because on the one hand, I just gone on a trip, and I left I went to Idaho. I'm in Silicon Valley in California right now. We had a corporate trip up to Coeur d'Alene up in Idaho, Coeur d'Alene Resort around the lake up in Idaho, and I'm looking at doing my research. And I'm looking at all the photos. Like, oh, this is going to be beautiful. Look at all these opportunities. Yeah. So that made it even harder. But I still left it at home. I left the Nikon at home because it's not a photography trip. Even though I'm going with a photography company, right? It's not about shooting. Yeah. I don't want to have all that baggage. I don't want to have to worry about someone stealing it. And plus, my phone is an iPhone 14 Pro Max, right? Mm-hmm. And it's if that can't do it, right? So I ended up leaving it home, and it was great. I have no regrets. In fact, I probably got shots that I wouldn't have gotten with the Nikon had I taken it, just for various reasons. And I'm curious, and just an anecdote to that, the other side of that is making the decision to or not to bring your laptop with you, right? Because that's the next thing for me when I travel. It's like, gotta have the computer, gotta have the camera, just in case I need to get some real work done, yada yada yada. On this trip, I did bring the MacBook Pro, but I considered just bringing the iPad and just letting that be it. That speaking of fun, just the mindset of being able to go somewhere with just a phone and an iPad and your clothes or whatever and your carry-on, how liberating is that? How liberating that you don't have to worry about the weight. You don't have to worry about the it being stolen because you can hide it really easily in your luggage. It's just a whole nother dimension. Changes your whole loadout on going on trips. It's like, okay, now I don't have to bring that extra bag. I can just bring a carry-on now because it's just an iPad. My phone's in my pocket. Got my AirPods. Yep. Good to go. So, that said, like when you look back at your DSLR world or your mirrorless world, the traditional cameras, bodies, lenses, and all that, do you think, is that a world that is diminishing? And I say that, let me frame that, because I look at the people, the audience of content that's out there consuming what we as content creators and photographers produce is consuming it. They're consuming it on phones for the most part. That's where the audience is. If I look at the numbers for TWiP and who's consuming the content of TWiP, it's vastly tilted towards mobile, and increasingly so over the years. Then it makes sense, right? So especially with photography, people are on Instagram scrolling or Threads or Facebook or whatever, right? And they're scrolling on the phone. That's where they are. They're not coming to a proper computer and looking up, So the question is that type of photography, the traditional photography with the DSLRs and mirrorless? Of course, there are plenty of uses that iPhone can't do, right? So I know that, I recognize that. Mm-hmm. But generally speaking, are we heading towards a world where those are the horses, and Ford is coming with the Model T, or in other words, the mirrorless cameras are the cameras of the past, and iPhones are kind of the electric cars of the future and the way forward, depending on your perspective. How do you feel about that? Are we doing that, or can both coexist happily?
I think it's doing that a little bit, but I don't think the mirrorless. I'm not sure about the DSLR market, but the mirrorless market, I think, is here to stay for quite some time. There's so many. I follow a lot of photographers on YouTube and watch their videos and stuff, and they're not using phones for their stuff. They're using mirrorless cameras and big lenses and stuff like that. I mean, because the quality is so much better from that type of camera. So I think, and I know, well, I don't know, but I mean, I'm quite sure a lot of them will take their phone with them. Whether it's for scouting purposes or just to take a photo and geotag it, so they can track where they've been, go back to it later. But they're not using their phones in the same way they use their bigger cameras. And I mean, I totally get that. I do. So I think I think with the increase of usage for mobile phones, I think that path did kind of go like this a little bit, but I think it's starting to level out to where they're coexisting a lot more now. Or not so much a lot more, but I mean, I think they're still going to coexist, especially with professional photographers. They're not gonna stop using their traditional cameras, their mirrorless and all that stuff, just to use an iPhone. They're not going to do it. I just can't see it.
Not today. Not today. I totally agree. I've spoken with photographers that, they may want to, and they may know that the phone can do a ton of stuff that they can't even do with their big camera. But part of it is it's just not quite ready yet. That's what they'll say. And then on the other side of it is the theater. I call it the theater of photography, like where you have a client. We were talking about this in the green room, right? You have a client that is expecting you to show up at a wedding, or maybe it's a commercial shoot or a fashion shoot, and you can do the job with your iPhone and get it done. It'll be great, but you're going to show up. You need to show up with expensive gear. That's the theater of it. You need to show up with gear that looks like you are worth that 5-figure invoice, right? You bill them 5 figures for the day, and then you show up with a phone that's less capable than the client, to shoot this job. They're going to be scratching their head. And the asterisk on that is, okay, if you're a Rick Salmon or Andy Leibovitz or someone of note like that's shooting, doesn't matter what you shoot with, right? You're just showing up, and they know automatically that that is just your process, and you're going to produce a saleable quality of work. But if you're just Joe Blow, Frederick, showing up in there with the iPhone after I sold you this bill of goods on what I can do, they're going to be scratching their head, at least until they get the results, right? So do you agree with that? The whole theater thing, where we're kind of in that mode of you gotta fake it a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah,
what do you think?
yeah. And another point about these versus the mirrorless cameras, and that is the optics on this. I mean, as good as it is, it's still not as good as good quality glass.
Yeah,
you can't beat optics. That's just a fact. So I got the 14 Pro Max as well, and as you know, the 48 megapixel sensor takes a really good photo. It's insane, but it's not going to be as good as say a 50 megapixel mirrorless. It's just because of the glass, because of how the light's getting to the sensor. It's just not going to be as good. And for me personally, because I'm not a professional, I'm okay with that. I take, pictures with this thing and I post them, and I really like what I post. And if people like it, then that's a bonus.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's such an interesting conversation, because a lot of it, another aspect, many facets to this diamond, right? One of the facets is the joy of photography, right? And people extract joy from photography in different ways. Some people just love the post-processing and compositing. Like my friend Renee Robin, she says when she goes out on trips or whatever, and she's taking photos of brick walls and dirt and clouds and all that, she's capturing raw materials that she'll later synthesize into something amazing. And that's her process. That's where she finds joy. Some people find joy in just, I love the glass, the heft of the camera, this mechanics that I get to hold in my hand, and I love playing with f-stops and shutter speeds to get the precise, all that. It's the joy of the journey versus the destination. And some people love the destination. With iPhones, it shifts a little bit, almost like going from a combustion car to an electric car, right? It's shifting. The people that drive combustion cars, or that are car enthusiasts, love the shift. They love the sound of the engine. They love modifying. They love all those things, and that's part of the overall experience. Driving is part of it, but not all of it, right? And on the electric car side, it's the same kind of calculus. I love the technology and self-driving and efficiency and environmental stuff and all that. So there's different reasons for each one. Neither one is, you can say is correct. They're both correct, right? It's interesting where this all goes. I'm curious from your perspective, do you, and I'll couch it like this, I feel like mobile, or not even not mobile, but mirrorless camera manufacturers, Nikon, Canon, Sony, Fuji, on and on and on. Panasonic with Lumix, etc. I feel like they are woefully behind phones in terms of being smart enough to create an ecosystem around their cameras versus just leaning into, hey, we got a new piece of glass. Hey, we've upped the resolution. Hey, it focuses faster. Why not put those dollars towards a proper app store and maybe adding a cellular modem into the cameras so that you can access the app store and upload. So do some of the things that you can do on the phone, or if not all of them, with proper glass, right?
Yeah, and I think I've heard you talk about this. I think I heard you talk about this.
I've been preaching that.
Don Komarechka.
Yeah.
You said something about it'd be nice to be able to go on the back of your camera, touch that screen, and go to an app store and get an app. I'm quite certain it was you I heard say that. So yeah.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
It was. Yeah. How come we can't do that? I mean, it's a computer, right? It's just a computer with anything else. And you don't tell me that you can't fit all this stuff into these camera bodies. These camera bodies, you could fit a lot in there. And if you could do it, if I could make phone calls from this, right, you could put all of this tech in my phone, in my camera, and give me the ability to do all those
ones and zeros when you get down to it, really. It's all ones and zeros.
I wonder why they don't do that. If one camera manufacturer decided to do it, then the seal is broken at that point, especially if it was popular. I know some people say, Lumix or Panasonic released a camera that had an app store, or Sony did it, with their kind of attempt at it. That was nothing compared to what Apple and Google, et cetera, are doing with their app store initiatives. I'm talking do something at that level or better for the content creator industry, because there's so many opportunities from a pro standpoint, being able to upload and do all the things that a photojournalist or any genre of photographer as well as from a consumer standpoint. Like, what if Greg McMillan wanted to create a version of you that shows up in a camera that says, okay, I'm going to teach you how to take photos of the Milky Way. Okay, first, I'm going to set your camera to the proper settings, So, why not? That would be amazing.
And imagine portrait mode on a mirrorless camera. I mean, with the glass, you get a very good portrait, but can you imagine being able to change the f-stop after the fact like you can with an iPhone?
Yeah.
How big would that be?
That would be amazing. Or just backing up a little bit, or zooming out, as it were. Yeah. Just the idea of computational photography applied to a mirrorless camera with interchangeable lenses seems like magic. And I would, if I had all the money in the world, or even at least some of the money in the world, right? I would, I would look at this industry, the mirrorless industry, as an industry that's ripe for disruption. It is ripe for disruption, where a big player like Apple or Google or Adobe or whomever, I would pick Apple, to be honest with you, because Apple already has experience building digital cameras. They did the Quick Take way back in the 90s, I think it was, the Apple Quick Take, and a number of other imaging things. What if Apple was to say, okay, we're going to take a fresh look at this industry, and we're going to first of all, we're going to buy Nikon so we can get their glass works. So we got all the glass, but we're going to reinvent this body and use our smarts in computational photography and miniaturization and all the things. We're going to create a new kind of camera that does all the things that your iPhone can do for the most part, with an app store ecosystem and all that. But it's pro, right? This is a pro phone or a prosumer and a pro level. You know how they do. There'll be the Apple camera and then the Apple Camera Pro that does all the other things.
Or the Ultra.
Or the Ultra, yeah. So why do you think that's a possibility? Like, do you think we ever hit the era where, or the time where someone like Apple or someone with deep pockets would come in and disrupt the industry?
Maybe someday, but I just can't see it happening anytime too soon. And when anytime too soon is like probably in the next 5-10 years, I just can't see it happening. I mean, I've heard it, but you know what? Maybe it'll be sooner than later, because I've heard that the iPhone's days are numbered. Now, whether that has something to do with Vision Pro or what, I don't know. But I heard somewhere, I don't know where it was, whether it was a blog post I read or I heard it on a podcast somewhere, but somebody has a speculation that the iPhone may not exist in 5 years. So if that's the case, are they going to rely on Vision Pro to do all the photography? I can't see it. I can't see the iPhone not existing without some form of replacement for photography, because the biggest thing about the iPhone is the camera system, in my opinion. They've gone from like 2 seconds or a second of airtime in the iPhone announcement to 15 minutes of it, and so that says a lot right there.
It does. Yeah, I can't see the iPhone going away either. I can see them pivoting it and maybe rebranding. Maybe that's the idea. Yeah, because the name or the word iPhone doesn't really fit the device anymore, because the phone is just one little tiny app that I barely use on the phone right now.
Yeah, exactly.
So why call it a phone, but on the other side of the coin, younger people, know the word phone as meaning a device that does many things like this. So maybe we've redefined the word phone. I don't know. But yeah, and then you bring up a good point with the Apple Vision Pro headset and the part of that keynote. I'm sure you watched the keynote where they were talking about you can take photos with it. Right? So you can take these 3D spatial photos with the headset. No one's going to be running around shooting a wedding with a headset on, but I can totally imagine, I can totally imagine them putting a level of functionality into these phones that allow you to capture for that environment. These have LiDAR and all the things in them, right?
Yeah.
So I can see them doing that as kind of a step one. I would love to see Apple develop a professional suite or device specifically for creating content for the Vision Pro. That would be amazing, right? Because now, especially if Vision Pro takes off, it doesn't go the route of Google Glass. But if it takes off and becomes like Apple thinks it will be, sort of an iPhone level in terms of popularity device, then the thirst for content for that device is going to explode from all levels, from Hollywood all the way down to podcasting and vloggers and all that. We'll need to figure out how to make great content for these devices, and they're going to need hardware.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if the roadmap for the iPhone has that specifically in mind.
Yeah.
Like we've been waiting for a better zoom, or like call it a periscope zoom or whatever. We've been waiting for that for the iPhone for probably 3 or 4 years now. And I wouldn't be surprised if whatever they come up with in the next version or the one after, something, whether it's hardware and software or even just software based, that will be to enhance the Vision Pro experience. Because by then, like by probably in 2 or 3 years, the Vision Pro, in my opinion, will be more suitable for consumer use as opposed to enterprise, which is kind of what it's looking like now.
Yeah. I mean, the price point, right? The price point is the big barrier. And I look at that price point. What did they say it was going to cost? I forget. Was it
$3,500 US?
$3,500 US. Yeah. I see that as a developer preview. All right. There's no way that, if you kind of looking at what Tim Cook said back in the, before it was announced, as he was kind of teasing that this thing was coming years ago, he said that this was going to be bigger than the iPhone and, yada, 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 all the things. No way it's going to be bigger than the iPhone at $3,500 US, which means this is a developer preview.
It's going to be physically bigger, but
yeah, that's it. Yeah.
That's about it for now.
Yeah, I feel like I feel like it would be more in the range of $1,000, $1,500 or something like that for people to get into, with probably different levels of functionality at higher prices. Knowing Apple, that seems like
they've got to recover some of the R&D money, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And they've got more money than more money than a lot of countries, right? So they
probably just got the change out of their couch to develop this thing.
Totally, exactly. Like here's a couple trillion. Let's throw it at the yeah. You look at it. You think of people like us that have kind of normal means, in terms of influence and money to do things with. Apple is not. It's not a business that has to hope things work in their direction so that this idea that they had will work, right? They have an unfair advantage in terms of revenue, cash on hand to put towards this. Yep. They can make something successful. They have the ability. I mean, all these people that have these in their hands, like the brand, it's not okay, let's write a business plan and see if we can't get this many people to know about it and brand recognition and this. None of that calculus works with Apple. It's like, okay, if Apple decided to sell lawnmowers tomorrow, it would be successful.
Because they know people would buy them.
They would buy them. Yeah, it's the iMower, and it does all these crazy things. Yeah, there's an app store for it, too, if you want to do patterns in your lawn. So yeah, it's interesting. So I'm really excited to see what's going to happen with that Vision Pro and how the future versions of iPhone or even current versions of iPhone will tie into that ecosystem that they're building, because you can see it, right? This is one of those things. You can see the patterns in the chaos, especially with the Disney folks coming on stage at the introduction. You could see where it's going already, and it's going to be, if it plays out the way they think it's going to play out, it should be an exciting time over the next couple of years to see this whole new form of content creation and consumption evolve from nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. I wanted to switch gears a little bit and talk about the apps that you are using as an iPhone photographer, an iPhone predominant photographer. It's like, what's on your phone right now in your go-to folder of apps?
Well, I use Reflex Pro camera as my regular camera. I mean, unless I need to take a quick snapshot of something, or if I want to use the 2x focal range or whatever, of the Apple camera, like that 2x is really a nice sweet spot. It's like 48 millimeter. But I use Reflex a lot. I use their Reheld app to do handheld long exposures. It's great for up to 30 seconds, and it does an amazing job. I had the developer on my podcast talking about how it all works and all that stuff, so it was really interesting. But for editing, it depends on, I'll probably use Darkroom. Sometimes I'll use the Photos app. I mean, it's just great for
it's
what
great,
it does.
yeah.
But I'm a technical guy. I like to have the histogram on when I'm shooting and when I'm editing. So I'll use Darkroom or maybe Raw Power. Raw Power, as you know, was made by the team behind Aperture, which we all miss so much on the Mac. But so Raw Power is really good. And what I like about Raw Power is it has the local tone mapping slider on it. So if you shoot a ProRAW image, you can slide that down to remove some of the, I call it Apple's secret sauce that they put in the ProRAW file. And, it makes it a little more subtle, and you get a little more of the raw image come out from behind it. Oh gosh. If I told you how many apps I have on my iPhone,
I know, I'm the same way.
Well over 200.
Wow. You have to send me a screenshot. Send me a screenshot of your app folder so I could put it in the show notes for this episode.
Well, I'll send a screenshot of the about part that shows how many apps I have, and then I'll send you a screenshot of what, like, basically the apps that I have.
Perfect.
It's crazy. But in my defense, because I do a podcast about this stuff, I feel I have to have a bunch of these apps in case I need to talk about them.
Yeah. That's your justification.
that is. But I mean, as far as the apps I use regularly, Reflex for shooting, Darkroom, Raw Power. Photomator's good for editing. But I have Lightroom Mobile. I'm not a subscriber to Adobe because I can't justify it. But So most of my workflow is on the phone, but yet I'm not afraid to do some stuff on the Mac. I
Okay.
have the 24-inch iMac, so it's got a nice big screen, and I have Affinity Photo on there for, Photoshop-ish stuff because it's
Yep.
pretty powerful. I have Pixelmator Pro on there. I have Photomator. I have Darkroom. It has a desktop. Raw Power has a desktop version. So I have all these things that if I want to see it on the bigger screen, they have basically the same functionality as the phone does. And, these old eyes are getting a little tired sometimes. So it's nice to have that bigger view. But
Yeah.
gosh, anything else that I would use would only be occasionally, like dramatic black and white, or something like that. Something if I'm just kind of in a mood to put together a black and white, I may open that app up. But it's I have so many different ones. Some that I use to play around with, like lens distortions and things like that. If I want to, put a big moon in the sky that's not really there or whatever, things like that, and I'll make sure it's behind the clouds. But it's there's so many different things that I could play around with. But I would say day to day, it's the reflex, reheld, and darkroom, maybe raw power, that type of thing for daily stuff.
Yeah. So, it's refreshing to hear that you're not a mobile or iOS purist, right? No, I'm not going to use the Mac anymore. Everything's got to be on iOS, or maybe as a stretch iPad OS, but everything has to be on the phone because, it's that the mark of an artist is, I'm going to use the whatever tools I need to use to execute the vision I have in my head. And if it takes, I can't get it done over here, I'm going to bring it over to the Mac and, spool up Affinity Photo and get it done there. It's all about the final image. So that's refreshing to hear. Yeah. Yep. And the other thing I want to throw in there that came to mind as you were talking is the fact that the mindset, I think, for me at least, I want to see if you agree with this, but the mindset around mobile photography is a little bit different when it comes to the apps that you can use, to modify or process your images. It's not I need to be a Photoshop whiz in this one application, and because it can do everything, and I need to figure out how to do all the things in this app. On the mobile side, it's a library of single-use apps that do one or a couple of things exceedingly well, maybe better than the desktop can do, but you're not really limited. And I don't even think the expectation is you're going to have a one-size-fits-all Hydra Medusa app in there that's going to do everything you could possibly get done to your image. The idea is you're going to process it, then you're going to, like you were saying, if you wanted black and white, you can go into, dramatic black and white, or you can go over here, you can go and the Focus app and mess with the bokeh. You can do all the things with different apps and pass your image to different apps to do different things to them. Have you found that as a sort of a mindset shift for you and the people that you speak to or teach on this stuff?
There are some people that think Snapseed is the be all end all of editing.
Yeah.
It is pretty powerful. It is pretty powerful. It has so many features in it, but to my knowledge, it hasn't been updated on iOS for quite some time. On Android, right. Yes, but on iOS, it hasn't really been updated for, I think, well over a year, unless one snuck by that I didn't see. But I think the nice thing about shooting with an iPhone is the fact that there are so many choices for apps, and I think everybody will have, like, people that are just starting out. I experience this a lot in some Facebook groups that I'm in. People wonder, okay, what am I going to use to edit with, and all this stuff. In fact, just the other day, this lady posted a picture of a nice little waterfall, and she says, "Help me out. What could I do to make this better?" So I said, "Okay, can I download the image and do an edit and show you what I mean?" She says, "Yeah, by all means." So I did that, and I did the edit, and I sent screenshots of all this thing, and I just did it in the Photos app, but I sent screenshots of all the edits I did, and explained why I did this, why I did that, and she thought that was fantastic. But trying to get back to the point here, I don't know if people are relegating themselves to just one single means of editing. I think the more they get into this, the more they explore, I think the wider range of things they're going to try. And
Yeah.
I think the biggest stumbling block will be the fact that some of these apps are subscription based. And
Yeah.
I pay for a subscription for a couple of them because I use them, right? I'm not afraid to pay for something that I'm going to use regularly all the time. But there's a lot of them that, like, okay, Lightroom Mobile, like I said before, I don't subscribe to Adobe stuff because I just can't justify the cost. And I just don't use it enough to do that. So if I sold pictures and made money with it, I would probably pay for it. But I'm just not there. So I do have some that I use regularly, but I think most people will realize that with the selection and with the choices that are available, they may kind of broaden their horizons with what they're using.
Yeah. It's a vast ecosystem or world of apps and techniques and training and all that stuff that it's very weird because it's almost like just below the surface there's all this stuff going on that's happening with the, that pertains to the device that you probably have in your pocket already and that you've been kind of overlooking for all these other shiny objects that are trying to get our attention. Thanks for doing this interview. I know we're running a little bit long. Are you okay with a couple of more questions? I want to
sure,
throw a
I could
couple
talk
more
about this stuff all day.
I love it. Okay, so on my list, I know you have a podcast, so I want to talk about what your podcast is about, and well, let's start there. So what's the podcast about? I'm guessing iPhone photography, but tell me more.
Well, it's called the Iphonography podcast, and so just a quick backstory. I started my podcasting adventures on Tiny Shutter, which was at that time the only podcast about iPhone photography. And I started on as a guest, and then they brought me on as a co-host, and it ran for 9 years. And the guys that were on it before I came along, even I guess they decided they'd done it enough and they wanted to kind of call it a day. So that was fine. So before it had ended, I had already started my own through a community that I ran on the Mighty Networks, and it was called the Artful iPhotography Community. And what I did there was I interviewed people in the community. So it was basically like an interview show. And I had, I forget, something in the teens by the time Tiny Shutter stopped. And Mark Sadowski, one of the co-founders of Tiny Shutter, said, "Hey, why don't you change your podcast, call it what you want, and take over what we were doing on Tiny Shutter?" So I did. So now it's about anything iPhoneography related. And my co-host, Dave Podner, he was a co-host on Tiny Shutter before I was. And I said, "Dave, what are you doing?" And I said, "Do you want to come with me?" And he says, "Sure." So he's located in Pittsburgh. I'm up here in Canada, and we have a lot of fun with it. And we do it every other week because my work schedule gets in the way. But yeah, it's a lot of fun, and it's growing. I think slowly growing, and I just love doing it.
It's great. Thank you for doing it, because it is. I think the direction that iPhone photography and the training around it and the ecosystem can go is only up and to the right? Because the phones get better and better and more capable and more indistinguishable from what we're shooting with proper glass. It can only get more popular. Here's an outside question for you. What do you think of people that shoot with iPads as their primary camera? Is that legal in your world?
I think it's okay, because if they have an iPad and they don't have an iPhone, then that's their camera, right? It's
Yeah.
the newer iPads are starting to get better and better with their camera system. They're starting to put a camera in it that might be a year or two old on the iPhone, but it's still a lot better than what it used to be. My wife has an iPad Air, I think it's the fourth one, and it's not bad. It's probably maybe like the iPhone 10 was, maybe. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what camera's in it, to be honest with you. She doesn't take pictures with it. She's got an iPhone. But but if that's all they have, more power to them.
And use it.
Now, if I'm at a concert and they're holding this thing up like this in front of it, that's when I take issue with it. But hey,
down in front.
Yeah. But and some people think it looks silly. Yeah. Maybe it does, but it doesn't matter. I mean, I was at a riverbank a couple of years ago, and I was taking pictures of these boats sitting on a little dock or whatever, and there's a lady standing there taking these pictures with her iPad, and I thought, yeah, okay, it's not a big deal. It's she's getting a picture, right? So some people might look at it as like maybe they're thinking they're using like the old style camera where you put the hood over your head, and put this the whatever you call it in the slate or whatever. Maybe that's kind of the vibe they've got when they do that. I don't know, but no, I really don't take issue with it, because if that's all they got, then what else are they going to do? So that's how I look at it.
I don't know if Chase Jarvis coined the phrase or if he got it from somewhere else, but I remember him saying the best camera is the one you have with you, right? And if you got to get the shot, or even if it's the iPad is your primary camera, like you said, no shame.
Yeah.
Go forth and capture. In a lot of ways, especially if you're using a late model iPad that has really good optics on it or a really good camera on it. What a great workflow, right? To shoot edit with a pen on the same device. I mean, that's science fiction level right there, of being able to capture. One other thing is, this isn't specifically photography related, but though kind of, the world of video is maturing on iOS, right? We've seen DaVinci Resolve get ported over to iOS. Of course, LumaFusion is on iPhone and iPad. There's a number of other lesser known apps that are available for people that want to edit video on their phone. What do you think about that space? I mean, I know you're likely not a video editor yourself, but looking at how people are sort of coming to the iPhone in some cases as the path of least resistance to content creation. Even vloggers like MKBHD, I don't know if you're familiar with him, Marquez Brownlee. He spun up another channel that's dedicated to his other passion, which is cars, right? And he made the commitment to shoot the whole thing on iPhone. And it looks great. I mean, it's a great. He's he's an unfairly talented guy, so there's that on top of it. Sure, but still, right? He's doing this great content and generating millions of views with a device that we all have. Like, I just want to get your thoughts on that space and the content creation, vlogger, podcaster space as it applies to using the iPhone instead of a quote proper computer. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I love that it's available for everybody to do. I've played around with LumaFusion, iMovie, like these things are on the iPhone. CapCut, there's another one, and if I'm doing a serious video though, I'll use DaVinci Resolve on my iMac. But I can throw something together pretty quick in even just iMovie on the iPhone, and I mean, it works really good until it doesn't, right? And then I have to move into something different, like maybe LumaFusion. But I mean, it's too bad the Photos app, it can edit videos, but only to the point where you can trim it and change the look of it. You can't really splice things together, and hopefully that'll come there someday soon, because it does it so well. But I think I haven't seen Marquez's new stuff that he's doing. I'll have to have a look for it. But I mean, there's just proof in the pudding that somebody who has all the editing power in the world in his office can do it on his phone. I mean, that's a driving force right there to maybe get other people to maybe look at that space.
Absolutely. And
I mean,
it's not.
I'm certainly okay with it.
And it's interesting because the way he approaches it, I think at the beginning he said, yeah, I'm going to do this whole thing on the iPhone or whatever. But that's not the point of the channel. The point of the channel is the content and the cars and all that. So you forget that he's shooting this whole thing on an iPhone until there's like a clue that, oh, I could see his reflection in that glass. He's just using his iPhone. You know, so that is a you know, another feather in the iPhone's cap, just that these big name content creators, professional experienced content creators are able to do what they need to do with the phone. Now, of course, I'm sure he's bringing all that footage or giving all that footage to his editors, and then they're sitting on giant workstations and making it beautiful. But maybe not. I don't know. Maybe he's editing it himself. I don't know. You know, and to that, one of the last questions I want to throw at you is, so earlier you mentioned ProRAW. We know the phone can shoot in ProRAW, a RAW format. Are you primarily shooting in ProRAW, or do you oscillate between letting it record as JPEG for sharing purposes and then ProRAW when you need to do something more professional?
Yeah, probably 90% ProRAW. I have the 2 terabyte iCloud Pro suite, or whatever you want to call it. I do the Apple One Premiere. And you know what? I never run out of space. You know, my phone is a 256 gigabyte phone, and it's always got probably at least 40% left, you know, free space on it, even with all these apps, but I offload them, whatever. But, you know, so I really like shooting in ProRAW because I like to have that flexibility. And, you know, the iPhone does such a great job when you're sharing an image. If it's shot in ProRAW, if I'm going to put it on Instagram, bang, it's throwing the JPEG up there, or the HEIC or whatever, you know. And, you know, they've made it to the point now where you don't even have to think about it. I have not had any trouble uploading an image somewhere from a ProRAW file on my phone. And I don't shoot ProRAW plus JPEG. I just shoot straight ProRAW. And I mean, there are times when I'll turn it off and just shoot JPEG or HEIC, and you know, because I know it's not going to be an image that I'm going to be worried about. Like in the Apple camera, for instance, and Dave and I were talking about this on last night's recording of our podcast. We went through all the features of the Apple camera, and when we got to say photographic styles, well, you turn that on, RAW shuts off. You know, you can't shoot one of those. You can't use those photographic styles in RAW. So I know right then and there, if I'm going to use the photographic styles, I'm not going to get a RAW shot. And I have to. I know that, but I mean, I also have to remember that. I have to remember that if this is a shot that I really want to maybe do something with, I'm not going to be able to use that photographic style. So, you know, I'm kind of mindful a little bit of you know, using it, and you know, when I can't use it or when I don't want to use it. So, but I would say 90%, easily 90% of my shots are ProRAW.
Yeah, good. That's good to know. Because I was curious about that, because and maybe my phone's set wrong or something, but I had to switch it from ProRAW back to a most compatible or JPEG or whatever, especially on trips, because I'm like, okay, let me take a picture of you guys. Okay, great. Let me send it to you. And then, you know, you hit that whole, okay, it's ProRAW, I can't send it, or they can't see it or whatever. JPEG is the universal format. So that's why I tend to shoot in JPEG primarily, and then if I'm going to shoot something where I feel like, okay, I need the latitude that RAW will give me, then I'll switch it to the RAW format. Yeah, but that might be just a workflow thing. Before we end this, you mentioned the HEIC format, which I know a lot of people may have seen and may not understand what it is or why it's there or what the benefits or negatives of it. Can you give us a quick synopsis of what that HEIC format is?
I don't know technically the meat and potatoes of it, but I do know that it's just as good, or if not better quality, than JPEG, because it can go up to 16-bit depth, whereas JPEG's only 8-bit. But
Yeah.
So there's HEIC, which is high, what was it? HEIC, high image efficiency or whatever.
Yeah, something like that.
Container, where HEIF or HEIF, or some people call it HEIF. HEIF is high efficient, or HEI, high efficiency image format. There's all these different formats, but it for some, I don't know, somehow they've made it so that it gives you better, just as good if not better image quality with a lot less storage space needed for it. Like you could take two pictures, a JPEG and a HEIF, and the JPEG might be 4 megabytes, the HEIF might be like 2.7. So I tend to use that more so than JPEG. And again, when sharing, the iPhone does a great job at providing what the sort, or what the destination needs for a file.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so it's a nice format that they put out, and I would far sooner use it than JPEG myself. Again, for the storage space and the quality.
And it's that format, if I'm not mistaken, that's what allows you to do I forget what the name of it is, the motion images, where you tap and you get a little bit of motion. Live photos, thank you. Duh. So live photos, is that stored in that HEIF format as well, or is that just a MOV file?
I'm not sure, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I want to say it is, because I feel like you can. Yeah, we have to look into. Maybe that's another episode. We'll dive deeper into this stuff. But yeah, I feel like it is. If folks in the audience know differently, comment on this YouTube video or on the blog post.
My co-host, he shoots live photos almost all the time. So Dave, you see this? Let me know.
Let us know for sure. All right, yeah. So that was that question. I'm ticking off the list. My last question to throw at you, Greg McMillan, is tips for photographers that are looking, and we'll position this as not new photographers. So photographers that understand the art of photography, i.e. the TWiP audience, right? But they may not have used their iPhone to do pro level work yet. Maybe some, but not a lot. What would be your tips for them, whether it be, some beginning tips, whether it be like, okay, go get these apps, or put your camera in this mode, to record in ProRAW all the time? Like, what are some fundamental tips for the burgeoning or budding iPhoneographer?
Number one is be aware that there will be limitations. You will experience times when you won't be able to do what you can do with your traditional camera. But also know that because these things are computational and the image is processed on a pixel by pixel basis, it's going to be able to do things that your other camera can't. And the best example there is that when you have a landscape image with some sky and some foreground, like something in the foreground, it will expose everything very well. Whereas in my Canon days, I used to have to basically shoot twice, once for the sky and once for the ground, and then process them and layer them and mask out and all that stuff. This thing does it so quickly and so easily. It's just mind-blowing when you first try doing it. But don't go into it expecting to get a portfolio piece. It's like I say, the quality of the optics is not as good as what you'd get with a Nikon or a Fuji or whatever. And you want to see that difference. Gavin Hardcastle, Photo Tripper on YouTube, did a video where he compared his it's an Android phone, but it's a new phone with a good camera system, compared that with his Sony. And I mean, you can see the differences there. So, but another tip is just shoot more, shoot lots. You experiment with the different features of the camera. And if the camera app itself can't do what you want it to do, then you can explore other apps. There's a lot of good camera apps out there. there's Reflex, there's Halide, there's Pro Camera, there's Camera M, there's Camera Plus. I mean, there's so many good ones, and you'll be bound to gravitate to one over the rest, and that's where you'll get more control, manual control that you don't have with the Apple Camera app. So, those are the things that I would suggest right off the bat is don't expect too much, other than expect limitations, and just shoot a lot, and, go beyond the Apple Camera app if what you want to do calls for that. Like my buddy in Australia, Shane Mawson, says he uses the Apple Camera for everything, and until he can't, until he needs something else. So.
And that was a question. So the Apple Camera, there's a bunch of apps out there that can, arguably replace the Apple Camera, the inbuilt camera on the phone. Are there any trade-offs to doing that, though? Like, so if I use a third-party camera app on my phone, that means I can't record depth data or something like that? Or do they have access to all the data that the camera can capture, just like the native camera app?
Yeah, some of them do have portrait mode built in, or like they've managed to build it in. The one that I use, Reflex, doesn't have that, but Halide has it. I think Camera M has it. I'm not sure about the rest of them, but if that's something that's important, definitely go to the App Store entry for that particular app and read up on it. It'll tell you if it's in there or not. The Apple Camera app is pretty fast compared to most of these other ones. But they're not that far behind. Like Reflex that I use can do a 48 megapixel ProRAW image, and it takes a little longer to process it. You can see it in the little window at the bottom where it's kind of processing it before it shows up. It takes a little longer than the Apple Camera app. But I mean, the Apple Camera app has a team of developers that is far superior than any of these, little independents that are out there. Yeah. So, that's one of the advantages of the Apple Camera app is that it's so fast, and the speed is just unreal compared to everything else.
That's why I use it. I mean, I primarily gravitate to the Apple Camera, not because I have something against the third-party cameras, but just because I feel like it's OEM. Right? It's like buying accessories for your car. You want to get OEM accessories that were designed to work with it. Kind of like glass. I know the Sigma, etc., make world-class glass, right, for your mirrorless cameras. But at the same time, I probably, if in a pinch, I would likely pick the equivalent Nikon glass before I would a third party, just because it's has the same name on it. It's going to work. Obviously, there's going to be no gotchas or compatibility issues. Same for the phone, and brand. Some brand loyalty. Though I'm fickle when it comes to brand loyalty. I'm loyal to the art form, not the device. Although I have devices that I love and use because they serve me well, and I will continue using them. If something better comes along, that I'm not going to continue using something that's arguably inferior on principle. I'm going to move to the best thing.
Yeah, that's true.
I'll absolutely move to the best thing. It's up to the manufacturers to keep me interested, not me to exhibit some misplaced loyalty in them. All this stuff is insanely interesting, right? Because there's so much that we could chat about. I want to leave it right there though, and put you on the hook to come back on. I'd love to have you back on to continue the conversation. Maybe we'll dive down into specifics. Maybe we'll do an episode on macro, or maybe doing portrait mode on the phone, and kind of start attacking different aspects. Like our mutual friend Rick Salmon used to tell me. And I still remember his voice in my ear to this day. He used to say, how do you eat an elephant? Because we were talking about some big project I was working on. He's like, Frederick, how do you eat an elephant? And he's like, one bite at a time. That was Rick Salmon's
so many salmonisms. It's crazy.
He totally does. He's like your uncle. And I still remember that. And he's absolutely right. And but obviously, what he meant by that is, you can almost accomplish any task if you break it down into smaller bits and knock those out. Same with this kind of stuff. If you want to understand your camera on your phone, start drilling into the individual features, portrait mode, macro mode, the high efficiency format and what that does, and RAW, all that at a time, so that you understand them, and then you can start sort of piecing them together. So Greg, tell the audience where people can find you, where can they find the podcast, and all the good things that you're working on.
Okay, the podcast, it has a website, and it's at iPhoneography.ca. Now it's HTTP, not HTTPS. So if you put in the S, it won't get you there. I don't know why, but it's built through Wix, Wix.com. It's a free one. So, I mean, I don't expect much else. But so on the website, you'll see each episode in the blog, where it'll have you the title of it. At the bottom of those pages, there's a link where you can listen to it online. And it'll take you to the podcast page where all the episodes are there. But if it's available on the Apple Podcasts app, any major podcast player. And I put out an enhanced version. Martin Bailey kind of got me on this. I've never talked to Martin, but I've listened to his podcast where you could see the images that he's talking about. And I've stumbled across when I process the audio of my podcast, I do it on Iphonic. Website, and you can put chapters in there, and then you can upload images. So I thought, this is great. So now when Dave and I are talking about a photo, you can actually see the photo on the screen in the podcast app, and it works on a lot of different podcast apps, but not Spotify. I don't know why, but anyway, that's where the website, or that's where the podcast lives on the net. You can find me on Instagram and Threads at McMillan Photo, on Twitter, or I guess we should call it X now, McMillan_photo. My website is McMillan.photos, and that's where I put articles and things that I've written and pictures that I've taken. I got some galleries there, and it's always a work in progress. But I guess that's probably the main areas there. There's a few other places, but
very cool.
They're
cool.
all over.
And I will list your contact links in the blog post for this episode and in the YouTube description, so people can jump straight over and start getting excited about iPhoneography. Cool. We'll leave it right there, Greg. Thank you for coming on. Right. I appreciate your time today. We went double the time that I thought we'd go. So that's the mark of a good interview, right?
I rarely keep things on time.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So that's cool. Thank you. Thanks for doing this. And again, sincerely, I'd love to have you back on the show again to talk more about this stuff.
Definitely will do. It's been a pleasure and like I say, an honor to talk to you, because I've been a big fan for years.
Awesome. Yeah, we have to have you come on when every single time Apple releases a new phone, you got to come on and tell us what the updates to the phone are and why we should care, from a photography standpoint.
Cool.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool. We'll leave right there. Greg McMillan, iPhone photography expert. Thank you for coming on. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Frederick.
This is TWiP.